I'll tell you what's wrong with your dolphin. You just used black, didn't you?
No,
No, did you use with white in it?
Darker on the top and lighter on the bottom. And perhaps that wasn't right.
It's coming up lovely. You need painting, and then we're done, aren't we?
Well, the seagulls can just be white, can't they? But they just need...
No, they've got blue on them.
Yes, and that's what I mean. I mean, they don't need to be painted as seagulls.
Don't they have to have feathers on them? Don't you have to paint in every feather?
That's a good one.
And this is one more. This is important.
Do more pictures. Do the pictures. Do the pictures. I was going to do those when I just cross this bar and wind them round.
It's really chilly. We drove over. So where have you put that one? Is that the...
That one. I need to just turn me a little bit off then, please, dude. Lush. Thank you very much, Solly. And then we can all sit down, look relaxed, and pretend we haven't done anything.
I can't see anything.
Hey? You can't see anything. You're doing really well, Solomon. Thank you. Yeah. Want a job in the theatre then? You can come in and rig my lights for me.
You're doing it very well. I'm not doing it that way. I used to work
I'll take
This is a great, and then of course she's all the way through.
Yes, you do.
That white shot.
Let's turn around and there he
Well, it's kind of one a decade. Yeah, it's pretty much one a decade. Slightly out of order.
Yeah. And this is starting to look like, you know, Fred we know now.
I wish. In Cambridge.
Right.
And that was my musical career.
Yeah.
So that's a bit out of order.
Yeah.
The next person on is my very dear friend and colleague Steve Mapp, who runs Broadway and who is responsible for everything that goes on here. I just wanted to say a few words about Fred, because I've had the privilege of working with him as a member of our board here for 16 years, and as chairman of that board for just over 8 years. Although he's been involved crucially in Broadway's development for more than 30 years, when he was part of Nottingham Media Consortium, which some of you will remember, at the end of the Midland Group days over there, and was instrumental in persuading those that need to be persuaded that Nottingham needed a media centre, and out of that Broadway was born. So Fred's had a huge involvement and commitment and impact on Broadway over very many years, and I know also that he loves Broadway, and I know that he loves the work that he does wherever he is, but I know he feels really heartfelt and passionate and proud of what we've achieved here, and he's still very much part of that, and we have a very exciting future ahead of us as well, so that this coming week, in fact, we're just about to launch Film Hub Midlands,
thanks to the significant funding from the British Film Institute, where Broadway is actually responsible for developing film culture, not just in Nottingham but across the whole of the Midlands, part of a national scheme that the BFI have with 5 hubs around the country. We are responsible for the Midlands. We have a strategic partner in Birmingham called Flat Pack Project. So it's a really exciting development for us. And also we'll be spending some money developing the infrastructure of the building as well later this year, which we have to as a public space, and we will be in fact improving this area as well, although it looks very nice today, I have to say. It's an example of Fred's commitment to Broadway, in the invitation that he gave today, where he asked not necessarily for presents, but for people to make a donation to our philanthropic fundraising scheme we've just launched recently. And that's a scheme which is based on donations that we receive, and that enables us to carry out a lot of the kind of community, educational and talent development work that we do. And I know that's really important to Fred, and that's something that we've been able to develop more fully with his governance over the last decade or so. In fact, some of the work that we support is actually on the screens. I think there are 2 screens. I thought there was one here. There's certainly one here where the food is, and we're showing some films that we've supported young people, young talent. So I hope you can have a look at that. And then I was going to sort of mention something a bit more personal about Fred, and related to work too, but where we discovered that he's quite enigmatic, and is not quite necessarily fully the person that we think he is, because as chair he's responsible for filling out, signing some very complex charitable commission and bank documents. And on one occasion they came back and they said, who's Fred Brookes? We don't recognise the signature. And so I was obviously a little bit confused, and had to check with Fred, and then I discovered that actually he's not always Fred. He's sometimes somebody else. Anyway, we managed to persuade the bank that it was all okay. But because of that, and because of today, I thought, well, I'd quite like to find a little bit more out about this. So I asked Monica if she knew a little bit more, and whether I would be able just to even mention it today. So she said yes, that's fine, and she sent me an email, which I'm going to read out actually, if that's okay, because it's quite illuminating, and perhaps enables us to get to know a little bit more about Fred that we might not already know. So bear with me 1 second. It's not too long, it's only a few paragraphs. Okay. Here you are, Steve. This is Barry Rice's email. The Pope has authorised this version. This story could be entitled So Much for Two Names. The story goes, he was a war baby, 1943. His dad was in a reserved occupation working for Rolls-Royce on the aeroplane engines. So he was around to father Fred, who was a war baby, not a baby boomer, technically. After Fred was born in 1943, the vicar came round. He asked Harry and Edna what they were going to call him, and they hadn't thought. Edna reached out and picked up a Radio Times. Her eye fell on the name Victor Sylvester.
Oh dear. I felt much the same.
However, he was never known as Victor, nor as John, his second name. From the start he was known as Little Jackie Brookes, after his dad's Jack. He was called after Jack rather than any of the other brothers, because Jack had been a prisoner in the war and had survived. Harry and Edna always called Jack to their dying day. However, at primary school in Belper, he was called Victor by the teachers and Vic by his school friends. At the grammar school, Struts, everybody was called by their surname, But as the new contingent of post-war trained seniors came through, they wanted to call the kids by their first names. It was the onset of modernity and informality. The rot set in. When he got to 13, he decided to reincarnate himself. He did that too, didn't he? He objected to being called Victor, thought it was a stupid name, and took the name Fred Brookes, spelled B-R-U-X. I think that's right, Monica, because it wasn't a spelling mistake, was it? The teachers resisted at first, but he insisted and wouldn't answer to the name Victor. So in the end, they gave up. The Brookes was a bit petered out, and once the point was made. So there we are. Fred, Victor, little Jackie Brookes. So it's just a big thank you from me personally and from Broadway, everybody at Broadway, for everything that you've done for us, and hopefully we'll continue in the future.
Okay.
So thank you, Fred.
Your agenda.
For those of you who don't know me, is David Ainley. So, a few snapshots of Fred, my contemporary at Derby College of Art. I recollect one day, particularly in the ceramics department, Fred and I had been given responsibility for lighting a very large gas kiln. Alone we were, and it seemed very reluctant to light until it must have been Fred suggested that we opened the door and peered in, and the moment that our heads were well inside the kiln, there was such a flash of flame that came right across us that transformed our appearance considerably. So
I've never got over it.
No. So that's the first of two hair stories that might come. So we emerged sort of rather shaken, but rather frizzled in this. Fred left Derby Art College, which was a great place, to go to Newcastle. I think somehow or another he tells he didn't quite fit in at Derby, but we think it was all because he was a lot brighter than us and wanted to go to perhaps the best fine art department in the country at that time, where Richard Hamilton was teaching, Victor Passmore had been there, and so on. So a great place. And Fred distinguished himself enormously there, where in the second year, I think it was, Fred was chosen to take on responsibility under the direction of Richard Hamilton for the removal of the really famous Kurt Schwitter's Metz Barn wall from Elterwater to the Hatton Gallery at the University of Newcastle. So Fred has become the world expert on this aspect of Schwitter's life. That is no joke, he really is. I feel in awe of knowing a world expert in anything, but to know a world expert in Schwitter's is wonderful. Some of us have been privileged on occasion to hear Schwitter's sound poems performed by Fred. Maybe if at some point he might do that again. Anyway, Fred went to Newcastle. I went to Manchester, and then a few years later, in my second teaching job, I was appointed as head of art at the aforementioned Herbert Strutt Grammar School, Belper. There I discovered more about Fred than I had previously known. In fact, I think I discovered the Victor there. But on the ceiling of the refectory, this was no Sistine Chapel, it was a prefabricated hut really. But on the ceiling of the refectory there was, as I recollect it, in Fablon,
yes,
a very large, right across the ceiling, still life of kitchen utensils and cutlery and so on, but in the corner signed F. Brookes. There it was. So that was the first time I knew of that. And the other thing that I recollect discovering about Fred at Strutt's was in the school magazine. There was a photograph of Fred looking like a matinee idol, and he really was. I think the photograph is outside there. He'd taken part in a play called Thunder Rock. This is a very famous play at the time. Just one thing about this, and Fred may in fact tell me more about this today. There was at Strutt's no stage, but it had a great reputation for drama. Previously, Alan Bates had been there, and then latterly Timothy Dalton and so on. It was extraordinary for drama. I don't think it was taught as a subject at all. But the one thing, and I discovered this when I went there as the art teacher, was that the stage had to be built. You had to go to Scaffolding of Great Britain and get a whole lot of scaffolding and construct the stage. So the fact that Fred was in Thunder Rock, which involved the making of steps of a lighthouse, I think, probably was a sort of precursor of Fred's great construction abilities in the Metz barn and so on. Those constructional abilities just latterly, 1971, Fred had a terrific exhibition at the Serpentine Gallery in London that involved something like 200 concrete beams, paving stones, and like blocks, which during the course of the exhibition were moved around into different kinds of construction. This was avant-garde art at its best this time. I think Richard Serra, you see, when I look at this. But that was a great triumph. I think that we might just end with another hair story of Fred. Do you want to say this, Joan?
Well, that's terribly wobbly, but if you stand there, I'll get up and do
Yes, okay, I'll stand here. Yes, Joan will just speak of, Joan's my wife, she will just speak of meeting Fred for the first time.
Well, I didn't meet Fred for the first time. I saw Fred for the first time. And I met, this would be in 1968, and I was with you. We weren't married but at that time. But I was standing at the bottom of the staircase in the RA, and I looked up, and there was this vision. You will not believe this. There was hair understudying for a halo, and I don't know where it's gone. Well, obviously it's the kiln effect. And I turned to David, not thinking he'll know anything about this, and I said, "Good heavens, who is that?" And he turned to me and said, "Oh, that's Fred Brookes." And I said, "You don't mean you know this person?" And that's how we met. Yeah. And he was amazingly dressed, but no hat at that time, but great. Yeah. Clothes, all the rest of it. As continues.
Happy birthday, Fred.
Oh, Michaela. Seems like there might be a theme developing here. So it's now nearly 40 years since I first met Fred. I was a young curator just starting out at Nottingham Castle, and I'd come across what sounded like a fascinating show that I could rent for rather a lot of money. It has to be said, I think even at that stage Fred was good. From Newcastle. On the day it arrived, this tall, charismatic and very charming man arrived to install it. And my first memories are of his height, his unruly mop of auburn hair, and this very deep baritone voice. And a whirlwind of energy and dynamism busily unpacking all of these extraordinary objects based on the theme of wood, and explaining with such passion why he'd selected them. Looking back on this experience, I think that show summarises much of what we know and admire about Fred. It was the kind of show that questioned assumptions based on rigorous research but with an artist's eye, engaging but fun, and it also took one on a journey out of comfort zones. Here was a range of objects brought together on the theme of wood, but taking in sculpture, crafts, paintings and photography in ways that were not really being done at that time, where crafts were still being seen as an inferior art form and rarely shown alongside fine art. I remember feeling very much in awe of Fred and wondering if I could ever aspire to be so confident and thought-provoking in my own emerging career path. When he came to pack up the show, he told me that he'd just been appointed to be the new director of the Midland Group, so he'd be coming down to Nottingham to live and work. He brought the same energy and dynamism to this new role, and looking back now, it seems amazing to think under his leadership just how many groundbreaking and international events took place during this time there. I may have got my timelines a little bit blurred, but this was a period of a solo show by new work by Paula Rago, controversial new work by photographer Robert Mapplethorpe, and weekly live art events with characters like Bobby Ayres swinging naked down rope ladders adorned with toasted bread stars. Here was a director who actively championed young black artists such as Donald Rodney, Keith Piper, and challenged perceptions around LGBT rights. No wonder that artists like Tate winner Lubaina Hamid singled him out for praise as an early supporter of their work and struggle be taken seriously. It is only now that I really understand just how extraordinary it was that work of this daring and quality were being shown outside London on hardly any budget and with minimal support from major funders. There was more than one occasion where Fred had to shoulder dealing with hostile press and audiences, resisting censorship and threats. I can't ever remember him losing his cool. I can still remember the opening when Monica arrived on his arm, an even longer standing friend to whom I'd been introduced when I first arrived in Nottingham. And here was a logical pairing of two of the most stylish people I knew, with matching hats and a shared passion for championing inequality, who brought together two sets of wonderful children in what has always seemed to me to be a brilliantly inclusive and respectful way. I was sad when Fred moved away from the Midland Group, but was pleased that we maintained contact and watched our families grow together. And when I applied for a job at the Arts Council, Fred was incredibly generous and kind in preparing me for the interview, and then acting as a mentor and support whilst I gained confidence in my new role. When he became a freelancer, he was one of the very first people that I would turn to, knowing that I could trust him to deliver first-class analytical work, to still help me find the wood amongst the trees, just as he'd done in our first encounter. It seems extraordinary to think we're here celebrating 75 years. For me, Fred remains one of the youngest thinking people I know, be it playing music, tending his fantastic garden, or helping another group of emerging artists to take their first steps along their chosen career path. I just want to say thank you, Fred. And although I know you're going to kind of officially retire, I'm sure we can still persuade you to work on projects with us. So thank you and happy birthday.
I don't want to talk about Fred. I want to talk about myself. Everybody else can talk about me. I started at the Midland Group in the early 70s. Oh, Vinny! My name is Vinny. And I started the Midland Group in the early 70s and was there under the leadership of Sylvia Cooper and then Anthony Everett, and we moved over to Carlton Street, and then it was Fred's turn. And under Fred, the Midland Group started to expand, and the cinema was up and running, and then we got the bar up and running, and the performance space up and running, and a lot was happening. And the events were just, Michaela referred to the events that were taking place there. And I think it was French and Saunders one Saturday night. And it was very, very busy. And a lot of money was taken, and I was responsible for the building, and for the money, and for the front of house, and for the safety of everybody who was in the building. And it must have been something I ate. But I found myself behind a locked door on the floor of the gallery, most unwell, and it might have been something I drank as well. Anyway, I was unconscious, and then I became aware that I was being manhandled, and somebody was going through my pockets, and that's where all the money was.
And I didn't know who it was who was doing this, and I could barely open my eyes. And apparently I did say, I was conscious enough to say, don't tell Fred, don't tell Fred. Don't tell Fred.
I ruled that place with a rod.
And then I was left in the recovery position and the door was locked behind me again. And then when I did come to, the money was gone. And I don't think anybody ever did tell Fred, but nobody knows what's happened to the money. I assume we banked it. Because it was him. And then on the Monday, you know, I turned up for work, or possibly the next day I turned up for work, and not a word was said. And I thought it was marvellous that he was just so supportive of me and all the rest of the staff there. And I was there for the whole time Fred was there, and he was just one of the best bosses I've ever had. So thank you very much, Fred.
This is from Carol Crowe, who was one of the artists who exhibited at the Midland Group. And she's very sad not to be here today. She says, the first time I met him was because he agreed to have an arts group I was in put on an exhibition at the Midland Group where he was director. The group was Visible Women, who had a feminist and collective practice. At the time, both were well away from established showing, and Fred gave us full frontal street side window gallery space, the official mainstream status. I had my first ever sale of my work and was now officially an artist. Many of the women in that group are still practicing artists to this day after over 30 years. It was a real step up from Fred and for us. And I would also like to record my huge thanks for the support he gave more recently to a group of a dozen teenage filmmakers I had delivered a course for. He welcomed us into Broadway cinema to show an hour-and-a-half programme of their work. We had a full audience in the main auditorium and then a reception afterwards here. More than this though, Fred took the time to come speak before the films, have the young filmmakers enjoy their moment in front of the crowd. More than one of these young people continue to work in the field now, and many people saw a new horizon of what filmmaking can be. It was wonderful for them, their family and friends, and said a great deal about how you grow the love of cinema. So now I know what you get up to. Right, so now I want to introduce Catherine.
So I'm Catherine Rogers, and I feel very honoured to be on this platform today, to be talking about working with Fred, with all these amazing people and all these amazing stories. I've actually only been working with Fred, even though for me this feels like a wonderful lifetime, but only 5 years. I came in to manage the Creative Leicestershire programme in October 2012, and I came in to manage Fred. Now, with all these people in the room, that just sounds so ridiculous to me saying it. And I've been Fred's manager for 5 years, and it always tickled me pink, and it still does when Fred introduces me as his manager, because I don't feel like Fred's manager. I have learned so much working with Fred. I've never really seen myself as Fred's manager. I've seen us working together alongside, and I have always felt, I don't think I've ever felt in any team so holistically supported as I have with Fred. His wisdom in some quite difficult situations where I felt like he's really had my back. I work with the partnership that we run, Creative Leicestershire, is actually a local authority partnership. So we run what is probably quite an innovative programme within a local authority, and there have been some challenges where you're in a system where you want to do something innovative and forward thinking, and you can't really move. And I've often been in a situation where I've wanted to do something quite radical and pee a lot of people off, and Fred's been, perhaps let's do it this way. And sort of slow, sort of steering in a very, it's still, nothing would be uninnovative, and we'd still do what we wanted to do, but it would be in a way that actually brought everyone along with us, and that way of working and being able to go into a room, and sometimes quite sort of friction, there'll be quite a lot of friction there, and Fred will have a presence and a command in the room. He might not even have to say anything, but it changes the energy in the room. And it's incredible, incredible ability, and I'm in such admiration. I just also wanted to say that there are lots of themes, obviously, tonight, but I live in Belper, and when I met Fred and I said, where do you live? I said, Belper, and he goes, oh, awful place. Really? Yeah, I was born there. I said, oh, Fred, come on, you must come and visit it now. And so I did manage to persuade Fred and Monica to come and visit the new Belper. And it was lovely because we walked through the town and Fred was sort of telling me who used to live above the shop there and who used to kind of walk and where he used to do his paper round. And for me, again, it's brought Belper to life. And we did take you to the Ritz, and I probably shouldn't mention the Ritz. But I said, look, there is a really, really lovely cinema in Belper, and Fred Waller, you were quite impressed that it had changed since you'd been there. So I think I'm not going to keep you so much longer from your food, but I do want to say thank you so much, Fred, for wonderful 5 years. I am absolutely not going to say that it will not continue, even though I know you won't be working and I won't be your manager anymore. But I'm here to many more years where I can ring you up and talk through my difficult situations. Thank you, Fred, and happy birthday.
Okay, it's a layer of amaretto, chocolate mousse with hazelnut praline, and then a ganache of amaretto on the top, and then sponge and gold leaf, real gold leaf,
Real gold leaf.
real gold leaf.
Right, next table.
I don't want to destroy it, but it's
It will be destroyed shortly because the gold is just going to disappear into nothingness.
75, yeah, 75.
Oh, I know, is it like big 75? Oh,
Only 22 real. It's too real, isn't it, to be a bit
Was it made by Rumpelstiltskin?
This is Michaela.
Oh, Michaela. Fantastic. Very talented. Fantastic.
So a layer of amaretto.
Oh, you said the right thing.
Chocolate mousse with a hazelnut praline.
Oh my goodness.
Followed with a chocolate ganache with amaretto. Real edible gold, and then spun sugar.
You're getting better and better, Michaela. I'm saying.
He's coming, there he is. Hey, there's the man of the night. How you doing?
Very good.
Lovely. I'd very much like you all to join me and Monica in singing Happy Birthday to Fred. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Fred. Happy birthday to you.
Not only does Fred have 2 names or more, he has 2 cakes as well. But he only has 4 candles. So would you like to see if you can blow out the candle? 4 candles.
I think I might just say a couple of words because this cake is an artwork. I'm reluctant to damage it in any way. It was Monica's conception, and it got finished at about 4:30 this afternoon. So there's been a bit of a panic on, and it's a wonderful thing. Do take the opportunity to have a look at it. It is on a turntable, so you can turn it round to see all the details. I will now attempt to blow out the candle.
With a 1, a 2, a 3.
These sticks in them.
Oh,
Yes.
yes, don't eat the dolphins,
Yes.
they've got candlesticks. They've got cocktail sticks in them.
That's right.
Yes. This is your birthday present from me.
Oh, I
And
thought that was the birthday.
No, and you can come and open it here. And then I'd like to call up Paul Dice, who has made another birthday present for you. And then we'll have a few speeches and then we can carry on with music.
Do I open this now? I'm extremely grateful for everyone who's been so kind to me this afternoon. And there are lots of presents over there which I haven't opened yet, but I assure you I will appreciate them properly. But this one is, oh, it's very complicated. This is from Monica to me. It feels as if it might be, could it be a picture? It's got lots of paper. Monica, who I've been married to for a long time, has recently taken up mosaic. And look at that. Seen this before. And round to this side as well. And give Monica wishes to have recognised that Anna Dixon, who's her mosaic teacher, has contributed to her skills. And that's wonderful, and it's so wonderful never to have seen it before, and for it to be a big surprise this afternoon. So I'm very delighted by that. Paul Dice is a friend who was a very good friend of our Lola, and is a skilled craftsperson. So I begin to have a hint of something that might be going on here. Paul.
So Fred, Monica asked me to make you a bag.
Can you use the shorter microphone?
So this is a present from Monica, made with love. I hope you like it.
Made by you.
And made by me. And please enjoy it, use it.
It's very big.
Yes, happy.
Cool. Right, so far. Big piece of tissue paper. There we go. Very nice. Oh wow! Oh, it's a new bag. Papa's got a brand new bag. Oh, that's lovely, Paul. Thank you very much indeed.
And this is to go inside. So
that's for my specs.
For your specs.
That's a spec.
Enjoy it.
Very much. And I would point out that this is a really good maker, a really good craftsman, who makes these beautiful leather bags in his own name. Watch out, Paul Dice is the name. Dig him out on the internet and go and buy some of his products.
I'm guessing there's quite a few parents and grandparents here today, and if so, like me, you've probably been driven almost to insanity by Peppa Pig. Yeah, there's been one thing within this constant flow of, and there's one voice that is mellifluous and calming and authoritative, and it's Daddy Pig in Peppa Pig. And the reason I know that it's calming me so much is that I'm sure that it's Fred doing the voiceover. We've already heard that this man leads a double or a triple life, and I think if you're not Daddy Pig, then you ought to be. And there's a new career for you in voiceovers, Fred. But Comedia was a madcap enterprise that I spent some time in, but Fred spent much more time in, from I think 1989 over 2 decades on and off. And for a time when Fred was working there, Comedia was one of the most influential think tanks in culture in Britain and beyond. And Fred really kept that show on the road. Fred and I share one similarity in that we were both doing fairly stable reasonably paying jobs when we were both lured away to join this crazy travelling circus led by a maverick impresario called Charles Landry, who can't be here today. And this is familiar to Fred, that Fred, you and I are here in England, but Charles can't be here today because he's in some exotic foreign location. But that was really Comedia's back. We were kind of foreign and exotic, but actually somebody kept the thing going day after day, week after week. And much of the time that was Fred. And even though it was a madcap caper and we were doing crazy jobs for people we never should have been working for, and we were turning up for interviews, going to addresses we couldn't find, we didn't even know what we were going to say at the interview, and I'd be sitting next to Fred and he'd be driving with one car and shaving with the other. And thinking, we haven't got a home here. But I misunderstood and I underestimated Fred's ability to both translate this kind of high flow, kind of part bullshit, part genius that Charles Landry created somewhere up here, and Fred's ability to channel it and focus it into something that people would pay good money for. And I think that the fact that if they're renowned for anything now, they should be grateful to what Fred did. But it wasn't just that Fred was brought in because he was so different from Charles, and Charles says that he values you because you're everything that he isn't in a way. And he's airy-fairy, and he admits it, and it's your Derwent Valley Fredness that ultimately he values the most. But he realises that that's probably wasn't the reason that you came to Comedia, and he's just asked me to tell everybody else, because you already know this, that it was pure destiny that you and Comedia came together. And we've already heard today about your special relationship and your special expertise with Coach Fitters and the Mertzbahn, and the fact that amongst the drawings within the Mertzbahn was one of a character called a professor, and this was in memory of that Schwitters had of a man who he used to play chess with and to discuss philosophy with, whilst the two of them were interned as enemy aliens in a British internment camp for Germans during the Second World War on the front in the Isle of Man, in Douglas, Isle of Man. One of those enemy aliens was Kurt Schwitters. The other was a political activist who had escaped with his life from Berlin. And that man was the father of Charles Landry, who became your partner, and that was destiny.
I don't think I ever knew that.
Well, you know now. It was meant to happen. It was meant to happen. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. Monica and my wife Carol were old friends from Visible Women days, and her present to Fred, which I've just given him, is the poster of one of her performances at the Midland Group, in which our son took his first steps on stage as part of that performance, which is part of our family law. But I didn't know Fred really, and I was wondering, I knew I had run out of road doing what I was doing, and I was wondering what I would do. And she said, go and see Fred. And I did go and see Fred, and we sat in his kitchen, and he looked at my fairly useless attempt to deceive him and told me all the ways in which it could be better. Because the great thing about Fred is he doesn't tell you what's wrong. He just tells you, it shows you how things could be better. And he opened doors for me, and he introduced me to people, and he helped me over that hump of not knowing what I was going to do with my life. And out of that has come the last 25 years of what I've been doing. And I think that what I really wanted to share with you was the generosity of Fred, of somebody who will see somebody they don't really know and help them just because they can. And we've done things in subsequent years, done various bits of work together, and he has always been the nicest person to work with because he never makes a fuss. He always knows the answer. He likes spreadsheets more than I do. And he just always turns it in. And I think that's a wonderful quality of self-effacement, of generous being part of something, but not needing to be the person who is the centre of attention. So it's particularly nice that tonight you are the centre of attention. And if I had a glass, I would ask you all to raise a toast to one of the nicest, kindest, gentlest people I've ever had the privilege to know, Fred Brookes.
Sorry, I am very moved by all the very sweet things that people have said this afternoon. I just want to add a couple of things to my thanks for all of you for turning up and being so generous and for being so nice to me. Two things really, maybe three things. One is, as you will have seen on the invitation, I was inviting people to contribute to, rather than to give me presents because I've got so much stuff anyway, to contribute to Broadway. And Broadway does mean a lot to me. Steve has outlined that. Our work with young filmmakers, which you can see on the screen in the next room, is something that I think deserves support, and I'd like to do everything I can to help that go forward. So do go and have a look at the website, and if you're in a position to make a donation to that, I can assure you it goes directly to the work with those young people. And Broadway's got a great record in that respect. There have been some mentions of the Midland Group earlier this evening. The Midland Group was Nottingham's Contemporary Arts Centre for a long time. In fact, it's as old as me. It was born in 1943, pretty much the same time that I was, and it died before me. It survived until about 1987 or 8. I had various brushes with that organisation. I was introduced to it as a teenager when I was at school. My art master, Michael Granger, over in the art school in Belper, where David was referring to earlier, he took me to exhibitions at the Midland Group when it was down on Bridlesmith Gate. Eventually I became its director for a period of time, and we had that was, I should explain. I mean, people have been saying all these very nice things about how clever I am. I've never done hardly anything that I've been trained to do. I just busk it, and so far so good. Thank goodness I've pretty much managed to hang on and not lose my way completely. And the Midland Group was one of those, because I'd never run an organisation, I'd never been a manager, I'd never had staff, I'd never had a board. I'd never had any of the things that go with running an organisation like that, and it was the steepest learning curve that you could imagine. But we held on, and although it had a tremendous debt hanging over it, which eventually killed it, but we kept it going for quite a few years with the help of Vinnie and a number of other really, really good people who I met during that period. Some of whom are here tonight. Paul, who has put the movies on in the next room, was in the Midland Group on an MSc scheme for unemployed people, and all those kinds of things. But I've just, that if I can do anything, it is that I can make it up. And that is what art school teaches you what to do. Art school teaches you one thing, which is questionable, that it teaches you anything at all,
But if it does teach you anything, it is you can make it up, and you do, and that's how it works, and that's seen me through to here, 75 years on. So I'm going to try and write the history of the Midler Group. I'm currently assembling material and finding sources and putting stuff together. And I never use the R word, but my project, one of my projects after I cease being an employed person at the end of next week, will be to write that story. And it's an arc. It has a beginning and a middle and an end, and there are things to be learned from all of the stages through which it went. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm quite excited about it. And I've got some other kinds of projects that I want to do too. I want to make more art, I want to make more music, I want to have more fun, I want to see more of my friends, and I want to do, and potentially sailing a boat. I've done some sailing. We used, Monica and I, to own a beautiful wooden 34-foot sailing yacht called the Idle Duck. Everybody laughs when you say Idle Duck, but it was a beautiful boat, which in the end ruined me and we had to sell it. But on the cake down here, as you can see, there are aspirations. It has kind of turned into the wreck of the Medusa. And perhaps it's got messages for current issues and things that are happening. The wave of migrants which is sweeping through the Mediterranean. Some of that gets into that story as well. But yeah, I hope you have the opportunity to look at the cake, and I hope you have the opportunity to come and sail on a boat with me sometime. That would be really good. I'd like to do that. Monica has something to say. 1 point.
1 point.
Just one, and then we're done.
Yeah, because Fred just decided to do this party about a month ago, which annoyed me considerably, we didn't manage to get the music together. But I would like to mention Julian and Ian and Zulu Road and Ben Martin, who couldn't be here tonight, and all of them. You might want to just say something about that, and then we'll have the music and we'll go.
Absent friends, really.
Absent friends.
And there's several kinds of absent friends. There's people who are somewhere else. There are people who are not with us any longer. I remember them all. Absent friends.
Music!